Welcome on in to the Nightcap recap, recapping week 5 of the NFL season. Rough night to be a preseason Super Bowl contender. It's a great night to be the 1972 Miami Dolphins and their last surviving members of that most recent NFL team to go undefeated, the last team to go undefeated, because in Foxborough, in Orchard Park, in Buffalo, the New England Patriots took down the last of the unbeatens, the Buffalo Bills, on a day where the Philadelphia Eagles also fell to the Denver Broncos. We'll get into that game a little bit later on, but it's a great night to be popping champagne in Miami. We don't have the champagne here on the Nightcap recap. It's a little bit of spiced rum, but let's get into it tonight. I mean, what a game in Buffalo. Drake May and the hard-charging Patriots come of age. They stun the Bills 23-20. And in a lot of ways, it was Stephon Diggs' New England coming out party. 10 catches on 12 targets. Diggs made up 146 of Drake May's 273 passing yards. Just an absolute clinic for a young quarterback who's really coming into his own, and a veteran wide receiver who might be finding, if not his last home in the NFL, one where he's really making an impact on the offense. But more importantly, and I think more optimistically about the Patriots' development as a contender from here, I was really impressed by Mike Vrabel's defense, slamming the door late in that game. And then you have the rookie kicker, ice water in the veins, splitting the uprights to win the game 23-20. They send Buffalo packing. And, you look at this Patriots team, they're starting to feel themselves a little bit. And I'm starting to get a little bit of that Washington Commanders vibe that we had a year ago, a team that is punching above its weight, a team that's getting better every single week, a team that when you look at it, it just has the feel of a team that can ruin somebody's day in the postseason. They spent a lot of money in the offseason to bring in some veteran talent. They have Drake May. They did everything you would want them to do to build around him during the offseason, during the NFL draft, during free agency. And tonight was one of the big payoffs of all of that investment in the infrastructure around your young quarterback. But I look at the season that Drake May is having, and listen, this is a kid who we're going to have to start having a conversation about. Is he a top 15 or so quarterback in this league? Just under 1,000 passing yards already, 7 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He didn't throw a touchdown tonight, but he moved the ball efficiently. And in the fourth quarter, he was the catalyst. He was the driving force for that Patriots offense for that comeback win. And, you just look at New England. It's time to take them seriously in the AFC and in the playoff pictures. So if you're joining us, let me know in the comments, what was the most impressive moment of the games across the league today for you? What are you sipping here on the Nightcap recap? Because it was a really fascinating day, really from start to finish. And Bull Black Nova checks in. Bills got outplayed and outcoached. Drake May be a problem. Hate to break it to you, Bull Black Nova. I think Drake May is a problem. He's winning games at an impressive clip to start this season. They're finding new ways to win, and he seems really confident and comfortable within the confines of the offense, certainly throwing the ball to Diggs, who's stepping up, especially tonight. And when you can play complementary football the way they did tonight, going up and just slamming the door on that Bills team, it's time to take them seriously. And, you look at some of the big games around the league, I thought there was a pretty common theme to 2 of the games today. 2 teams, 2 franchises that we looked coming into this season as 2 of the more complete rosters in the NFL that we thought could be legitimate Super Bowl contenders. One whose season has been derailed by injuries, and one, after stumbling for their first loss on Sunday, is still in the midst of a full-fledged identity crisis on offense. Had a really similar issue prop up for both of them. Of course, I'm talking about the Baltimore Ravens, who you'll read in the column tomorrow morning on 4 Downs. I wrote the obituary on their season because it is over. It probably ended last week, but today, getting embarrassed the way the Ravens did in Baltimore to the Houston Texans, that puts a capstone on any notion that the Ravens could come back from this, and any idea or any potential that they could contend or compete. But the Ravens and the Eagles, struggling in a key aspect of the game in very similar ways. Well, let's start in Baltimore. That game was never competitive at 44-10. But I think that when you look at that game, when you look at that offense, how quickly the Ravens got away from Derrick Henry, it goes to show you a couple of things. One, I think there's a real conversation to be had about whether or not Derrick Henry is washed, whether or not he is done. We'll get inside the numbers on that. But two, the fact that they just never got into the running game on a day where Cooper Rush was trying to stop the bleeding, on a day where you had like 8 defensive starters injured, when you had Ronnie Stanley out, Derrick Henry has 15 carries for 33 yards, averaged 2.2 yards per carry. But here's the thing. People talk about the Ravens getting away from Henry early, which they did. They never really tried to run the ball. But Derrick Henry ran the ball just 5 times for 6 yards in the first quarter. I don't think it's out of the question to ask if Derrick Henry's just done. You think about the fumbles in week one. You think about the fumble in week three that cost them the game against the Detroit Lions late. The fumbling has become an issue. But if you take away that week one outburst, when you had the costly fumble that turned the tide of the game and opened the door for Josh Allen to kick it open and come back and win that game, take week one and the 169 rushing yards off the table. Since that night, Derrick Henry is averaging 3.2 yards per carry, and he has just 2 rushing touchdowns over the last 4 games. That's not the same Derrick Henry that we've seen. I know they're banged up. I know the offensive line isn't in great shape. I know that Lamar Jackson got hurt in Kansas City last week. I understand that it was Cooper Rush out there against a really good Texans defense and a Houston team that needed that game today. But this is not the same Derrick Henry. And sometimes when running backs fall off a cliff, they nosedive off of that thing, and it happens really quickly. And in Philly, it might be fair to start whispering some of those questions about Saquon Barkley. Because listen, Saquon, it seems like, is feeling some of the impacts and some of the effects of last season's 2,000-yard rushing season. And today, the Broncos sold out to stop him, and they took him out of the game. The Denver Broncos made Saquon Barkley a non-factor. He had 6 carries for 30 yards. And remember, this is a game that the Eagles led in the fourth quarter, and for the entire game, Barkley totaled 6 carries for 30 yards. That's inexcusable. I know that Denver rattled off 18 unanswered to come back and win the game. And what Bo Nix did was incredibly impressive. And what Cortland Sutton was able to do with a couple of big catches and what Evan Ingram did in the clutch, it really became the hallmark of what you expected the Broncos offense to be this season. They're starting to turn that corner. But in Philadelphia, other than the 47-yard catch and run, which was Saquon's longest catch and run in an Eagles uniform, he was a non-factor. I know that they stacked the box. I know Sean Payton and Vance Joseph stacked the box against the Eagles repeatedly late in that game, but they never even tried, Philly did, to run the ball. And you had all week, you heard A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith talking about wanting the ball more, and they doubled down. The Eagles doubled down on trying to get them both involved early. But let's not even take away a performance of a big game from Saquon Barkley like we did with Derrick Henry. Saquon Barkley this season is averaging 3.2 yards per carry, and he has 3 rushing touchdowns for the first 5 weeks of the season. That's not the same Saquon Barkley. And I know Landon Dickerson is banged up. I know that Lane Johnson isn't 100%. I know this Eagles offense on paper is one of the top offenses in the league, but they're dealing with some injuries, and the Eagles' play calling and lack of identity. I said going into this week, coming off the Eagles' win in Tampa Bay, that there was no real reason to worry about the Bills and worry about the Eagles, that they were both leaning into their winning formulas, even if Philadelphia was trying to find a way. Well, they both lost on Sunday. They both lost. And the Eagles, they continue to not really know what they want to be, what they can be on offense. And they have to figure that out and figure it out quickly, because the rest of the NFC is creeping up on them. There's no real separation at the top. You have 3 4-1 teams. You have the Eagles, the 49ers, you have the Lions, and you have the Buccaneers. You have 4 4-1 teams at the top of the NFC. And right now, I'm not so sure that if you threw all those names in a hat, if the Eagles are the cream of that crop. But if we want to talk about the other side of the equation in this league, one of the teams that is nowhere near the Super Bowl conversation, didn't belong in that conversation, I was still really impressed by what the New Orleans Saints did today. But if you read between the hash marks, if you listen to the Between the Hash Marks podcast with my good friend Mike Tanier and I every week, we've been really hard on New Orleans. I have repeatedly called the Saints the worst team in football, but they showed up today. And credit to Mike Tanier, he called the upset on the podcast earlier this week. And for the Giants, Jackson Dart had one really good drive. And it seems like he's building his chemistry with Theo Johnson. If you're looking for reasons to be optimistic about the Giants moving forward, and even after today's dismal loss in New Orleans, it's Jackson Dart building a chemistry with Theo Johnson because I've long had the theory that young quarterbacks need a dominant and efficient tight end to lean on to really speed up their development. Johnson seems to be developing into that. But man, that Saints defense just had their way with Jackson Dart. There was that really ugly interception where Dart telegraphed the ball where it was going, it was picked off. And of course, you had the Cam Scatterbo fumble that was returned 86 yards for a touchdown by the Saints. New Orleans isn't going to win a lot of games. They're just not. They're not built to. I don't know that they're really trying to. Everyone I talk to in that building, they seem like they have sights set on figuring out the long-term situation at quarterback via the NFL draft next spring. But look, Spencer Rattler got it done today. They threw all over that Giants defense and they got their first win. So let's raise a glass to Kellen Moore getting his first W as the Saints head coach. Speaking of first wins, how about the impressive first win for first overall pick, Cam Ward? You're going to read about this in the column tomorrow morning. I named him the Rookie of the Week across the NFL. He looked like he came of age in Arizona in just an electrifying fourth quarter, 164 yards in that final frame. And I spoke with Chris Sanders, former Titans wide receiver, briefly after the game. He said, quote, I saw some Steve McNair and Cam Ward today. He was poised under pressure, showed some leadership and a will to win, unquote. Long way to go before we start putting Cam Ward in the same category of Hall of Famer Steve McNair. Long way to go before the Titans become a competent team in the AFC. But I got to give a lot of credit to Cam Ward, a lot of credit to Calvin Ridley. He became the favorite target of that offense today. 5 catches, 131 yards in a 22-21 thrilling comeback win. And it was the fourth quarter for me. 164 yards for Cam Ward. That says it all right there. Big moment of the game, clutch moment, clutch performance. That's what they saw coming out of Miami when they made him the number 1 overall pick. And on the flip side, one thing to take away from that game on the losing side of the equation, the Arizona Cardinals aren't even fool's gold at this point. They're fool's bronze. They're fool's bronze. And Mari DeMarcado dropping the ball at the goal line that sparked so much of Tennessee's comeback, that's inexcusable. You just can't have that happen. Somehow that happened a few times a year in the NFL. It can't happen. You have no margin for error when your team has no real consistency in the passing game, as the Cardinals don't. The running game, it was fine today. That's where they scored all their touchdowns, but it is not a functioning offense. There's no multifaceted nature to what they're doing on offense. And I just don't think there's much rhythm. I don't think there's much identity. I don't think there's much to like, really, about the Arizona Cardinals. And you look around the league today, I'm impressed by the Indianapolis Colts, who just continue to get it done. Daniel Jones playing his way into the fringes of the MVP conversation. 7 touchdowns, 1 interception so far this season, 1,290 passing yards. He's found a home in Shane Steichen's offense. There's no getting around this. This is Baker Mayfield, the revival. This is leaning on your running back, Jonathan Taylor, 17 carries, 66 rushing yards today, 3 touchdowns. He began the day as the leading rusher around the NFL. I'm not sure if he's still the leading rusher after today's action. I'd have to crunch the numbers on that. But 3 touchdowns on the ground. Daniel Jones, 212 passing yards for Jones, 2 touchdowns. It's a really complete offense. Tyler Warren, we can talk all we want about Emeka Egbuka running away with the Offensive Rookie of the Year, which I think he's going to. Another just spectacular, spellbinding performance from Egbuka today. But you look at Tyler Warren, 4 catches, 44 yards and a touchdown, and the kid just does it all. He's a playmaker. He's dominant, and they have a centerpiece of their offense with Tyler Warren. But I'm really impressed by Daniel Jones. I think that this could be the next chapter for him. And if nothing else, he seems to have left the turnovers that have dogged him through his career to date at the Newark International Airport in New Jersey at the end of his tenure with the Giants, taking care of the football, making some big plays, doing what you want your franchise quarterback to do. So raise a glass, take a sip for Daniel Jones. Big win for the Lions. Not sure what to say there. They jumped out to a big lead early in that game, took the pedal off the gas. Jake Browning, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks. Trey Hendrickson touched on this in the column tomorrow, which you'll read. I spoke to a couple of NFL executives on best fits ahead of the trade deadline. There's a belief that this has gone sideways enough that the Bengals could become sellers. Trey Hendrickson could be the most impactful name to be moved at the trade deadline ahead of November 3rd. Some interesting teams were brought up in my conversation with a scout about a potential landing spot for Trey Hendrickson. But when you talk about the edge rusher market, Trey Hendrickson, Arnold Ebiketie, they might be two of the top edge rushers who could be moved. But overall, really exciting day across the NFL. It's a bad day to have been a preseason Super Bowl contender. It was a good day to be an upstart. You look at the New England Patriots pulling off a win. You look at the Minnesota Vikings hanging on against Dylan Gabriel. You look at Tampa Bay forging their identity, reinforcing their status as a contender. Well, really exciting day. It was an exciting week overall. I'm excited for Monday night. I think the Monday night game in Jacksonville with the Chiefs taking on the Jaguars, it's a litmus test. It's a barometer for the Jaguars. It's a game that the Chiefs sneakily have to have now after the Broncos won. After you look at a team like the Patriots winning tonight, when you look across the landscape of the AFC, you can't write off the Houston Texans, even at 2-3. You certainly can't write off the Indianapolis Colts. Big game Monday night. Looking forward to the podcast this week with Mike Tanier. Thanks to everybody who checked in on the Nightcap recap. Appreciate you hanging with us. Hope you were sipping something good. It was some spice rum over here for a spicy day across the NFL. I'm Matt Lombardo. Check out Four Downs on Between the Hash Marks on Monday morning. Follow me on Threads at Matt Lombardo NFL. It's Matt Lombardo on Blue Sky. Have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you this week.